I'm Paul St John, age 68. In December 21, I signed a contract for social housing in Cobham, Surrey, expecting it to be for life. My landlord was PA Housing. They had 23,000 tenants across the country. After housing costs, my income was £156 a week, a little above the poverty line. On 1st March of this year, 23, I got a letter from PA. Housing costs were to rise from April by 40%. I did sums. After a 10% rise in my pension, my disposable income would fall to £125 a week. Now that means that over a 2-year period, my disposable income would have been halved. My standard of living would have been halved. I do want to tell a story about Elmbridge Borough Council, my local authority, so that you know a bit about what they're like. I suspect it's similar to most other councils. It publicises its services with posters and online, and I saw that it offered a drop-in advisory clinic for legal matters, benefits, and there were 2 locations that were within walking distance, the library and the community health centre. And at both, when I asked, staff just stared at me because they had never heard of the scheme that was advertised outside the building. So instead of providing a service, the council claims to provide one in a brightly coloured manner while sparing itself the expense of actually providing one. I hope you get that. Anyhow, on March 1st, I was in shock and scared. And 2 days later, I sent an email to PA with a series of what I thought were direct, simple questions. However, in 6 months, PA has managed not to answer them at all. Also, a word about the people in social housing. Most are old and have no money. Many are ill, most are tired, not up for a fight. They were once, but not now. Most have no means to increase their fixed income. Once they could have done an extra shift or put their prices up, not now. At a time when the rest of the country is going on strike because their rises are not keeping pace with inflation, this group of people is ideal to bully, to hit with a 40% pay cut because of their inability to fight back. It took a few days for me to realise that PA's tactic was not to acknowledge, never mind answer. They're obliged to engage with tenants' problems promptly, according to the website of the Regulator of Social Housing. More of them later. However, emails, paper letters, notices of protest were all treated as though they didn't exist. Telephone calls, of which I had several on tape, were fielded by staff strictly trained not to provide any information at all, not to communicate. No, they couldn't help with my particular problem. No, they couldn't pass me on to someone who could. That department doesn't use the telephone, and so on. The questions were also put on my behalf by a local councillor and by the local MP, and more of them in a minute too. Why did you wait until the last possible legal moment to inform tenants of a 40% rise in costs? PA can't answer this question without incriminating itself, so it gaslights me, pretending I haven't asked. As a social housing provider, PA receives concessions from the government. Where in your charter does it say you're allowed to plunge tenants deep into poverty who weren't there before? I didn't get an inadequate response. I got no response. The council emailed Michael McDonough, CEO of PA, with my questions. They would be answered, came the response, at a council meeting that had already been arranged. There, McDonough promised written answers. I have the minutes. That was 6 months ago. No answers have come. In late March, at a public meeting, McDonough promised me full answers within 5 days. It's recorded and witnessed, and nothing came. Finally, I submitted a formal complaint This meant I had to use the PA website and go through their robot. I didn't want to do this because the experience is abusive in itself. One has to answer humiliating questions, and one is restricted in the answers that can be given. And all boxes have to be ticked, otherwise the thing doesn't submit. 3 weeks later, I got a response. It was 2 pages of platitude, 1 question half answered, but in such a way as begged further question, and the rest ignored. Then a paragraph beginning, "We hope we have answered all your questions." It was gaslighting, nasty form of abuse. I wrote back, itemising each omission, no answer. PA have been gaslighting their tenants since March. The letter I received apologised profusely for the 11% rise in net rent, something I was expecting, but made no mention at all of the 450% rise in service charges. Jumping through hoops now, I made a second complaint. The contract I signed, based on the words used, guaranteed me that my housing costs would rise each year by no more than the RSH allowed, which was 7%. I asked them to draw my attention, I asked PA to draw my attention to any words in my contract which contradicted what I believed. There are none. But anyway, they didn't, because they cancelled my request by pretending I hadn't made a request. I don't bother to try and approach PA anymore, even though I know I'll be gaslighted. It is still upsetting, so I avoid it. If one is a social housing tenant with problems, then it seems obvious where to go. The regulator of social housing has a solid governmental ring, and it's obviously imbued with a traditional spirit of fair play. Yes? No. The gist of my longish correspondence with the RSH is that their function is not to help tenants. For that, I need to go to the Ombudsman. I had asked one question. Since the RSA set restrictions on how much landlords can increase rent each year, does this power extend to things like service charges? A very simple question, which was, guess what, ignored on the first 2 occasions I asked it. The third time I got somewhere, no was the brief answer. The RSA has no control over service or other charges. Well, naturally, this begged another question. What is the point of controlling the one if the other's uncontrolled? Under those circumstances, a landlord can still raise rents as much as they want. No answer. Again, no answer. The third time, I put the question in bold type, something I dislike doing because it's rude. And in any case, I assume that the person I'm writing to can read and is interested in reading what I have to say. Anyway, I got no answer. I laid everything out in detail and copied all documents, all emails, to the Ombudsman. The reply expressed sorrow that I was unhappy, but told me I had to exhaust PA's formal complaints procedure before they could deal with my case. I had alleged and then provided evidence that my landlord was an abuser who seemed to enjoy abusing and gaslighting me, and that further contact would only result in more abuse and more trauma. However, according to the Ombudsman, the only important thing was that I go through this procedure, that I return to the source of my abuse to get more of the same. Finally, I received an email from PA confirming that the procedure was exhausted and that I would have to go elsewhere if I wanted the matter taken further. I copied to the Ombudsman, who responded by closing my case because I had not exhausted PA's complaints procedure, even though I had just sent them evidence that that is what had happened. I know. All I could do is show you the emails, which are very clear. The Ombudsman, very, very keen to do absolutely nothing, was responding to a fictional reality that had nothing to do with what I had sent. PA's approach to the abuse of tenants is informed probably by their certainty that the agencies supposedly in existence to help badly treated tenants are designed to do the opposite, to in their turn gaslight complainants. and drive them mad. The help, the assistance offered by the RSA and the Ombudsman is as real and tangible as Elmbridge's help centres. Dominic Raab played a cameo. He wrote to PA on my behalf and finally had a response which he forwarded to me. It was a page and a half of generalised platitude that didn't address any question, and certainly not any of the ones I wanted answers to. Raab wrote to me, "I hope this answers all your questions." The only subject about which he became passionate was the matter of completing PA's complaints process. Why the protocols of an abuser are more important than what is actually happening escapes me, except that it's a way of controlling. Several hundred of his most vulnerable constituents have been hit with a 40% rise in rent. That's awful is his public image. That's fine is the real one. Now to my rotten borough, Elmbridge Council. They let it be known that McDonough had been summoned to explain himself. This was in late March. I lobbied to be allowed to attend the meeting but was refused. The chair began the meeting by reminding councillors that this wasn't the time or the place for Michael, as he called him throughout, to be asked any questions or put under any pressure. I have the minutes. What followed was an unchallenged, self-pitying, self-aggrandizing statement from McDonough. Michael and the chair had collaborated beforehand in order to make sure the meeting achieved nothing. Elmbridge can claim, however, that they took the matter of rent rises so seriously that they demanded the presence of PA's CEO. McDonough can allege that he was grilled by the council. It was a plain and obvious stitch-up. It was corrupt. Real message, you want to slam poverty-stricken pensioners with a 40% rise, go for it. Elmbridge Borough Council waved it through. Journalistic scrutiny is all that's needed to have these abusive parties running for cover, retracing steps, making excuses. There is nothing Machiavellian here, no Rasputin, no Genghis Khan, no one to be scared of. Just small-time third-raters enjoying their brief ability to gratuitously abuse real people. For example, banks for years have been abruptly closing customer accounts without notice and without explanation. It happened to me, it's abusive. In that time, thousands and thousands have written to the press and the Ombudsman without any result. If it hadn't actually happened to you, you didn't know about it. When it happened to Nigel Farage, because of his contacts, it was all over the media and things immediately changed for the better. No one knew until it was in the papers. The same applies to this. And to no-win, no-fee solicitors. Gaslighting is a very nasty habit, a very nasty thing to do, a very nasty thing to have done. There are 23,000 potential clients, starting with me. I also think that what's happened to me is the reality of woke. Trans rights, critical race theory, a window dressing. This, the gaslighting, the abuse, the control, the bullying, is the goods in the bag. To feel the worst of it, it helps to be old and poor. Tennessee Williams warned me against that. I should have listened. Whichever way I turn, right now, there is someone to calmly explain to me that 2 + 2 make 5, that the opposite of what is true is in fact true. Well, in my flat and in Cobham, 2 + 2 still make 4, at least for now. Cobham is where the oldest, the sickest, the weakest and the poorest have just been hit with a 40% rise in housing costs and a 50% reduction in their standard of living. Paul St. John is a professional name, and my email address is paulsj, Cobham, Cobham, @gmail.com.